I actually laughed when the process server handed me the envelope. Not because there was anything humorous about it, but because I'd been lying flat on my back for 4 months with a steel brace fused into my spine. I could barely sit up, let alone do anything else. My hands shook as I read the first line. Notice of legal action. Harassment. Stalking. My ex-wife, Linda Marshall, was suing me. According to the filing, I had followed her across Ontario, showing up at her office in Ottawa, outside her sister's cottage in Muskoka, and even lingering near her physiotherapy clinic in Kingston. Every allegation came with neatly listed dates. March through June, 2024. Specific. Damning. The same months I'd been recovering from spinal fusion surgery at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. My name is David Cole. I'm 64 years old. And until that lawsuit landed in my hands, I truly believed I'd already lived through the worst chapter of my life. 3 years earlier, my construction business collapsed when our biggest client declared bankruptcy and left us unpaid, $810,000 gone overnight. Everything unraveled after that. The company. The house in Burlington. My 27-year marriage to Linda. Eventually, my health followed. Stress crushed my spine so badly that by last February, standing for more than a few minutes was impossible. Surgery wasn't optional. It was survival. That's what made the lawsuit so surreal it almost crossed into comedy. Every date Linda claimed I'd been stalking her, I'd been confined to a hospital bed on the 7th floor, barely able to walk 10 feet without my legs giving out. My surgeon, Dr. Rahman, had been blunt about recovery. 12 weeks before stairs. 16 weeks before driving. The lawsuit arrived during week 17. I called my lawyer, Mark Liu, immediately. Mark had handled my bankruptcy and knew every ugly detail of my divorce. When I read him the accusations over the phone, he went silent. David, he finally said, this is actually good news. Good news? My ex-wife is accusing me of criminal harassment. Good news because you couldn't have done this. Hospital records. Nursing logs. Security footage. You were monitored around the clock for 4 months. This will get thrown out fast. I wanted to believe him. But Mark hadn't seen what I had. Linda had included photographs. 12 of them. Full color. In every picture, a man who looked disturbingly like me stood in the background. Same height, about 6'1". Same build, though I'd lost weight during recovery. Same thinning gray hair. Same wire-rimmed glasses I'd worn for over a decade. In one photo taken outside a Starbucks in Ottawa, the man was even wearing a navy windbreaker identical to one I owned. She has photos, I said quietly. Someone who looks exactly like me. Another pause. Email them to me, Mark said. Well, handle this. In the meantime, document everything. Hospital records. Visitor logs. All of it. That night, I went through my phone line by line, every text, every call, every email from February through June. My daughter Rachel had visited twice a week. My son Ethan had flown in from Calgary once. My brother Paul came every Sunday. Beyond that, my entire social world consisted of nurses, physiotherapists, and the elderly man in the next bed who watched game shows at full volume. The lawsuit demanded $200,000 for emotional distress and requested a restraining order. The court date was set for August 15, 6 weeks away. Linda's lawyer had filed in Ottawa, a 3-hour drive from my apartment in Toronto. Even thinking about the trip made my back ache. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Not from pain, though there was plenty, but from how fundamentally wrong everything felt. Linda and I had plenty of issues. The business failure poisoned what little remained between us. She blamed me for bad contracts, for trusting the wrong people, for losing the life she'd grown used to. By the time she filed for divorce, we could barely be in the same room. But stalking? Harassment? That was never me. I studied the photos again with a magnifying glass. In the Ottawa Starbucks shot, the man's face was visible in profile. The resemblance was unsettling, same nose, same jawline. But something was off. His posture. He stood slightly hunched forward. I'd spent months in physiotherapy learning how to stand perfectly straight to protect my spine. That man didn't move like someone who'd just survived spinal surgery. The next morning, I contacted St. Michael's Medical Records Department. It took 3 days and $200 in fees, but it was worth it. 416 pages documenting every minute of my stay. Admitted February 14 at 6:10 a.m. 9-hour surgery. Post-op infection. Extended ICU stay. Transferred to recovery on February 28. Discharged June 10, 118 days later. The nursing logs were meticulous. Every 4 hours. Vital signs. Medications. Meals. I'd been on morphine for 3 weeks. Needed assistance to reach the bathroom for 6. I hadn't left the floor until week 14, when they wheeled me down for a CT scan. Mark reviewed everything and scheduled a call with Linda's lawyer, Susan Whitaker. I listened on speaker as Mark laid it out calmly. Ms. Whitaker, my client was hospitalized during every date listed in your complaint. We have exhaustive medical documentation proving he was physically incapable of being in Ottawa, Muskoka, or Kingston. Her reply was sharp. Mr. Liu, we have photographic evidence and eyewitness testimony. 6 individuals independently identified Mr. Cole at these locations. Identified someone who resembles my client, Mark corrected. There's a meaningful difference. And I should add, we also have records of disturbing phone calls made to my client during this same period. Calls originating from Mr. Cole's phone number. My stomach dropped. I had called Linda exactly twice during my entire hospital stay. And suddenly, none of this felt absurd anymore. It felt deliberate. Once was to tell her about the surgery. Once was to tell her I'd survived it. Both calls lasted under 2 minutes. No arguments. No emotion. Just facts. What calls? I asked, breaking my silence. Mr. Cole, Susan Whitaker replied smoothly, her voice heavy with sarcasm. It's nice to finally hear from you. My client received 17 calls from your number between March and June. She made the wise decision not to answer any of them. Your voicemails were unsettling. That's impossible, I said. Check the phone records. I called Linda twice in 4 months. We have her phone records, Mr. Cole, she replied coolly. And they tell a very different story. The call ended shortly after. Mark Liu didn't look reassured. We need your phone records immediately, he said. And we need to figure out who this lookalike is. You believe me, right? I asked. I didn't make those calls. I believe the hospital records, he replied carefully. But someone went to significant effort to make it look like you did. This isn't random harassment. It's targeted. I requested my phone records from Bell that same afternoon. While waiting, I started asking myself the obvious question. Who would want to frame me? The business collapse had created no shortage of enemies, subcontractors who lost money, suppliers stuck with unpaid invoices, former employees who lost their jobs. But that had been 3 years ago. Why now? And why through Linda? Then something clicked. During one of Rachel's visits in April, Shed casually mentioned that Linda had started seeing someone new. A man Shed met shortly before my surgery. Rachel hadn't met him, but she said Linda seemed happier than she had in years. What was his name? ID asked at the time. Something like Eric or Daniel, Shed said. No, Daniel Reed, I think. At the time, I hadn't cared. Now, I did. I opened my laptop and searched Daniel Reed Ottawa. Nothing useful. I tried Daniel Reed Toronto. Still nothing. Then another thought hit me. What if they hadn't met at book club at all? What if they'd met online? I logged into Facebook for the first time in months and searched Linda's friends list. There he was. Daniel Reed. His profile picture showed a man in his late 50s, graying hair, lean build, standing in front of the Rideau Canal. I clicked through his photos. My stomach tightened. Daniel Reed looked like he could have been my brother. Not identical, but close enough. Same height, judging by the people beside him. Similar facial structure. Same style of wire-rimmed glasses. Even his hairline thinned the same way mine did. I took screenshots and emailed them to Mark immediately, then called him. Tell me I'm imagining this, I said. Look at this guy. A long pause. That's concerning, Mark finally said. Very concerning. Where did you find him? He's Linda's new boyfriend. She met him right before my surgery. Mark went quiet again. This may not be a coincidence, he said carefully. But we need proof. We can't accuse someone based on resemblance alone. Do you know anything else about him? Just his name and that he lives in Ottawa. Let me dig into it, he said. In the meantime, your phone records should arrive tomorrow. That'll tell us a lot. They arrived the next morning by email. 68 pages. I printed every one and went through them line by line. The calls Susan Whitaker mentioned weren't there. According to Bell, ID made exactly 2 calls to Linda's number. March 5, 2:41 p.m. 1 minute, 38 seconds. March 6, 9:09 a.m. 2 minutes, 11 seconds. Nothing else. I called Mark immediately. The calls don't exist, I said. According to my records, I called her twice. That's it. Mark didn't sound surprised. That means your number was spoofed, he said. Someone made calls that looked like they came from you when they didn't. That's possible. It's easier than people think. And it's also traceable. We can pull tower data. If you were in a hospital bed and the calls originated in Ottawa, well, have it. Why go to all this trouble? I asked. Why fake photos? Fake calls? That, he said, is the real question. There was a pause. I have a private investigator I trust, he added. Former RCMP. His name's Evan Cross. I think it's time we brought him in. I met Evan Cross 2 days later at a Tim Hortons near my apartment. He was a big man, mid-50s, with the controlled movements of someone who'd seen enough chaos to learn restraint. I showed him everything, the lawsuit, the photographs, Daniel Reed's Facebook profile, my phone records, my hospital documentation. He studied the photos for a long time, occasionally pulling out a jeweler's loupe to examine details. This is sophisticated, he said finally. These aren't casual snapshots. Look at the angles. The framing. The lighting. You think someone hired a photographer? I think someone planned this carefully, he replied. Who is Daniel Reed? I told him everything I knew, which wasn't much. He nodded, made notes, and stood up. They'll run a full background check, he said. Give me a few days. 3 days later, my phone rang. David, Evan said, his voice flat, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Daniel Reed doesn't exist. What do you mean? I asked. I saw his Facebook page. You saw a Facebook page created 11 months ago, Evan Cross replied. The profile photo is stock imagery from a Toronto modeling agency. The rest of the pictures were stolen from unrelated social media accounts. Daniel Reed is a fabricated identity. My head spun. Then who is he? I asked. Who is Linda actually dating? That, Evan said, is where it gets interesting. Head quietly reached out to contacts in Ottawa law enforcement and asked them to check whether Linda had been seen publicly with anyone matching the description. They found something. A man named Kevin Dutton, Evan continued. 58 years old. 2 prior stalking charges in British Columbia. Both settled out of court. He moved to Ontario last year. My stomach dropped. Jesus Christ, I muttered. She's dating a stalker. It appears so. And erase the part that matters most, Evan said. Dutton looks nothing like you, or the man in those photos. He's about 5'7", heavy-set, full head of dark hair. But he has experience. Surveillance. Harassment. Manipulation. The pieces began sliding into place, but the picture they formed was disturbing. Why frame me? I asked. If he's the one dating her, why make it look like I'm stalking her? Evan leaned back in his chair. She may not know what he's doing, he said. Or he may be playing both of you. Stalkers are often paranoid and obsessive. They invent threats. You're the ex-husband. In his mind, you're competition. But I was in a hospital bed. Exactly, Evan said. You were the perfect target. You couldn't investigate. You couldn't confront him. You couldn't even physically show up to defend yourself. He probably assumed you'd settle, pay the money, and disappear from her life permanently. We need to tell Linda, I said. She needs to know who she's with. Not yet, Evan replied firmly. If we tip him off, he vanishes. What we need is proof that he's the one in those photos. And how do we get that? I think he'll make another move, Evan said. People like him always do. His plan was simple, and risky. He would put Kevin Dutton under quiet surveillance and wait. In the meantime, Mark Liu filed our formal response to the lawsuit, attaching my full hospital documentation and highlighting the inconsistencies in the alleged phone calls. He also filed a motion demanding cell tower data for every call Linda claimed came from me. It worked. 2 days later, Susan Whitaker contacted Mark requesting an in-person meeting. We met at her office in Ottawa, a glass tower overlooking the Ottawa River. Linda was there. She looked older than I remembered. Harder. Tired. Susan sat beside her. And across the table sat a man I'd never seen before. 5'7". Heavy build. Dark hair. Kevin Dutton. This is my client's partner, Mr. Dutton, Susan said smoothly. He's been supporting her through this difficult time. I kept my face neutral, but my pulse was hammering. This was the man who had impersonated me. The man who had stalked my ex-wife while making it look like I was doing it. And he was sitting there, playing the attentive boyfriend. Mark walked through our defense methodically. Hospital admission records. Nursing logs. Security footage from the recovery ward. Phone records proving only 2 calls. The physical impossibility of me being in multiple cities while bedridden. Color drained from Linda's face as the evidence stacked up. She kept glancing at Kevin. He maintained a calm, concerned expression the entire time. Ms. Whitaker, Mark said evenly, someone went to considerable effort to make it appear my client was stalking Mrs. Cole. Someone who resembles him. Someone who spoofed his phone number. This is not mistaken identity. This is identity fraud and criminal harassment. But not by my client. That's absurd, Susan replied, though the sharpness was gone from her voice. Is it? Mark said. We are formally requesting forensic analysis of all parties involved, including Mr. Dutton. If someone is impersonating my client, surely you'd want to know who. For the first time, Kevin Dutton shifted in his seat. And that was all Evan needed. Kevin's expression finally slipped. Just for a fraction of a second. A flash of something dark and angry. I don't see why I'd be required to submit to anything, he said coldly. I'm not the one being accused of stalking. No, I said, speaking directly to him for the first time. My voice was calm. You're the one who did it. The room exploded. Susan Whittaker immediately demanded we retract the statement. Linda looked back and forth between Kevin and me, confusion and fear spreading across her face. Kevin stood abruptly, his cheeks flushed. I don't have to listen to this, he snapped. Linda, we're leaving. That's when Evan Cross stepped into the conference room. Had been waiting outside. Mark had sent him the signal. Evan walked straight to the table and placed a thick folder down in front of everyone. Kevin Dutton, he said evenly. Also known as Kevin Marshall. Also known as Daniel Reed. Kevin froze. Wanted in British Columbia on 2 counts of aggravated stalking, Evan continued. Violated a restraining order in Vancouver last year. He slid a photograph across the table. Taken 3 days ago. Mr. Dutton entering a costume shop here in Ottawa. Purchase receipt included. Grey wig. Wire-rimmed glasses. Linda gasped. Kevin spun toward the door. He didn't make it 3 steps. Evan moved fast, faster than anyone in the room expected. In seconds, Kevin was pinned against the glass wall of the conference room, his arm twisted behind his back. Through the glass, I saw 2 Ottawa police officers entering the office. Linda didn't know, Kevin shouted as the officers cuffed him. She had nothing to do with this. I was protecting her from him. He's the threat. I was in a hospital bed, I said quietly. For 4 months. Kevin didn't answer. Over the next several weeks, the full story came out. Kevin Dutton had created the Daniel Reed identity specifically to get close to Linda. Had researched her online, learned everything about her divorce, and molded himself into exactly the kind of man she'd be drawn to after years of marriage to me, stable, attentive, quietly successful. But Kevin had a pattern. A pathological jealousy of anyone from his target's past. In British Columbia, had done the same thing before, harassed a woman's ex-boyfriend so relentlessly, using messages that appeared to come from the woman herself, that the man had eventually attempted suicide. When Kevin learned about my surgery, he saw an opening. Frame me as a stalker while I was physically incapable of defending myself. Destroy any chance I'd ever have of being part of Linda's life again. Had hired a photographer from Vancouver, someone who owed him money, to follow Linda and stage photos where I appeared in the background. The photographer wore a wig, wire-rimmed glasses, and clothing chosen to resemble mine. They coordinated everything through encrypted messaging apps. They thought they were careful. The phone calls were even easier. Kevin used online spoofing services to place calls from my number, leaving increasingly disturbing voicemails while playing the role of an obsessed ex-husband. Linda had saved every one of them. Police later seized them as evidence. At Kevin's apartment, investigators found a wall covered in photographs of Linda. Hundreds of them. Images taken months before they'd supposedly met. Notes detailing her routines. Her schedule. Her favorite places. Had been stalking her long before he ever introduced himself at that book club. The charges stacked up quickly. Identity theft. Criminal harassment. Fraud. Multiple violations of restraining orders in British Columbia. Bail was set at $100,000. He couldn't post it. Linda came to see me 3 weeks after Kevin's arrest. I was at a physiotherapy clinic near my apartment, slowly rebuilding strength. She waited until my session ended, then asked if we could talk. We sat in a quiet corner of the waiting room. In dropping the lawsuit, she said softly. Obviously. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She looked exhausted. I should have known you wouldn't do something like that. You're not that kind of person. But the photos, the calls, it all felt so real. He was very convincing. Her voice cracked. I feel stupid. You weren't, I said. He's done this before. He's very good at manipulation. She wiped her eyes. The police said he'd been watching me for months before we even met, she said quietly. Months, David. Learning everything about me. Planning all of it. We talked for over an hour. She told me about the fear she'd felt believing I was following her, how unsafe it had made her feel in her own city. I told her about the betrayal of being accused while lying helpless in a hospital bed, unable to defend myself. What's going to happen to him? She asked. Mark says he's facing serious time, I replied. Between the charges here and the violations in BC, 8 to 10 years, most likely. She nodded slowly. And for the first time in a long while, the room felt quiet, not with tension, but with truth. Good, she said quietly. That's good. People should be protected from people like him. The lawsuit was formally withdrawn in September. Mark Liu filed a countersuit against Kevin for defamation, identity theft, and emotional distress. Realistically, we'll probably never see $1 from it. Kevin has nothing, but the judgment will follow him. It's on his record now, where it belongs. Linda moved temporarily to her sister's cottage in Muskoka. She needed distance from Ottawa. From the memories. From everything. We exchange the occasional text now. Nothing heavy. Just brief check-ins. The marriage is long over, and it will stay that way. But we're no longer enemies. We survived something together, even if we didn't realize we were in it together at the time. My back is improving, slowly but steadily. I'm up to walking 40 minutes a day now. Eve started thinking about what comes next. Maybe teaching construction management at a community college, something that lets me use what I know without destroying what's left of my spine. This whole experience taught me something I wish I'd understood years ago. When someone is trying to destroy your reputation, the truth may not be obvious to others right away, but it is still your strongest weapon. Documentation matters. Evidence matters. Facts matter more than feelings or assumptions. Linda believed Kevin because what he gave her felt real. But feeling real isn't the same thing as being true. I also learned that predators like Kevin depend on isolation. They choose moments when their targets can't fight back. He targeted me because I was lying in a hospital bed. Because he thought I'd be powerless. What he didn't count on was that even from that bed, I could still gather evidence. I could still build a defense. I could still find people like Mark and Evan who believed in facts, not appearances. And here's what I tell younger people now whenever I get the chance. Technology can be weaponized against you. Phone numbers can be spoofed. Photos can be manipulated. Identities can be stolen. But that same technology also creates records, digital trails, timestamps, cell tower data, things that don't lie. In my case, hospital monitoring systems, phone records, and security cameras saved me. The digital age makes certain kinds of harassment easier, but it also makes the truth much harder to bury. I'm still rebuilding my life at 64. Still recovering. Still processing everything that happened. But I'm here. I'm free. My name is clear. Kevin Dutton is facing justice. And Linda is safe. Sometimes the system works, but only if you fight for yourself, document everything, and refuse to accept false accusations, no matter how convincing they might seem. Truth has a weight lies can't carry forever. You just have to hold on long enough for that weight to tip the scales. And that titanium rod in my spine? It's a permanent reminder that even when life breaks you down completely, the right support, and enough time, can make you strong enough to stand again. Thank you for spending this time with Rising Strong. If this story meant something to you, stay with us, subscribe to the channel and keep rising, one story at a time.